I think we're all here. Are we ready to start? David?
We are, Chair. We are live on City Cable Channel 10 and all the social media networks. We are currently good to go.
Fantastic. So I am going to call the meeting to order and start with the statement that we read at the beginning of most of our, or all of our Zoom meetings. In compliance with California Governor Gavin Newsom's executive order to protect public health and prevent the spread of COVID-19, this Planning Commission meeting is being conducted via teleconference on the city's website. It is also provided on a wide array of streaming media platforms to offer access to the public to the fullest extent possible. WehoTV staff have confirmed that this Planning Commission meeting is currently streaming successfully on Spectrum Channel 10 and online at weho.org/WehoTV. In addition, and as a courtesy, this meeting is also successfully streaming on the city's YouTube channel at youtube.com/WehoTV and Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and Android TV. WehoTV staff monitor this broadcast on all platforms throughout the meeting and will notify the Commission Secretary and Planning Commissioners should broadcast disruptions arise. Please do not interrupt the live meeting by calling or texting the Planning Commissioners about difficulties viewing the meeting. If you're experiencing viewing difficulties while watching this live stream, please reload the page or visit weho.org/WehoTV to access our official live stream and to view a list of other available streaming options. In addition, you may call in to listen to this meeting by dialing 669-900-6833, meeting ID 980-6185-7784, and then press the pound sign. Please understand that internet speeds, device reliability, third-party platform reliability, and individual or personal technical issues are out of the scope of this broadcast. WehoTV staff has published a guide at weho.org/WehoTV to troubleshoot your connection. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I would like to ask Commissioner Vincent to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, if you will.
Where is she? Sorry, let me unmute myself there. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. David, could you please call the roll?
Good evening, commissioners. Tonight, Commissioner Thomas will be absent. She's officially excused from tonight's proceedings, so all roll call votes will reflect that. Commissioner Vinson?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Here.
Commissioner Buckner?
Here.
Vice Chair Hoopengarner?
Virtually here.
Chair Bass?
I'm here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes? Vice Chair Hoopengarner?
Yes, I would like to request that item, the item on consent, whichever item number that is.
9A.
9A, thank you, be pulled for discussion.
I would second that.
Thank you. We will pull item 9A and move that to the area of our agenda for excluded consent calendar, which is number 13. Any other changes, or do we have a motion to approve with that change?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. And David, could you call the roll on that?
This is for approval of the agenda as amended. Commissioner Vincent,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hoopengarner,
Aye.
Chair Bass,
Aye.
and the agenda is approved as amended, noting Commissioner Thomas as absent.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes, item number 5. We have 3 sets and I'll take them individually because we might have different votes on each one. So I know David has one correction on November 19th to read into the record, which is the first one.
David, I believe I sent you about 5 corrections.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm getting like major feedback here. So if I'm not following along with you in real time, that's my apologies. Lynn, I never got your, did you email them to me?
Remember I sent you the screenshots and you said you got them all?
Oh, yes, those have already been incorporated into the minutes that are in your packet.
Okay.
Chair, the corrections I have for the November 19th, 2020 minutes on page 6 of the November 19th minutes on page 6, line 13. I need to correct Adam Knoll's name to read Kroll. He actually had his name in there twice. I corrected one and the other one I neglected to. So that will be changed and amended as stated. And that's all staff has for November 19th.
Okay, so with that change, is there a motion to approve the minutes from November 19th? Commissioner Buckner moves.
I move approval.
I'll second.
Can we do this one without a roll call and just say, does anyone object? Do we need a roll call? I was
We
trying to
need
move
a
it
roll
faster
call
since
for
we're-
every vote. Yeah.
Okay,
We need to do a roll call with every
I was
vote.
trying to help David with the feedback. I apologize.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, okay. Commissioner Vincent,
I recuse myself.
abstaining, okay. Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hoopengarner,
Aye.
Chair Bass.
Yes,
And the minutes for November 19th, 2020 are approved as amended, noting Commissioner Vincent abstaining and Commissioner Thomas absent.
thank you. Let's move on to December 3rd, 2020. Do we have any changes there? A motion to approve?
So moved.
Commissioner
Second.
Buckner, you're seconding?
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you. David?
Okay, Commissioner Vincent,
Abstain.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Vincent,
She
I think you
abstained.
mean Commissioner Jones. Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hoopengarner,
Yes.
and Chair Bass.
Yes,
And the minutes for December 3rd, 2020 are approved as presented, noting Commissioner Vincent as abstaining, Commissioner Thomas absent.
thank you. And one last set here, January 21st, 2021. Any changes to that set of minutes? Any motion? Commissioner Buckner?
I move approval.
I'll second.
And we'll ask David for a roll call.
I think we all just need to shake our computers. We've got a serious lag here.
Thank you. Commissioner Vincent,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Huppengartner,
Yes.
Chair Bass,
Yes.
and minutes for January 21st, 2021 are approved as presented, noting Commissioner Thomas as absent.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public comment. And David, do we have anybody who's asked to speak at this point in our meeting? It's an opportunity for folks to speak on items that are not on our agenda.
Chair, I do have one. I didn't actually get any requests for this public comment section. I do have one hand risen from the phone number 14342. If you'd like to speak, go ahead at this time. Other than that, I'm not showing anyone else. And it looks like it's not for this item. So I think we're good to go then.
Great. Thank you very much. Item number 7 is our director's report. Do we have Mr. Kehoe with us? Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Just a quick update on some council items on the next agenda. There have been discussion at the city council about our ped and bike plan and where we were in the status of implementation of a lot of our bike projects. So it might be of interest of commissioners to watch the city council agenda on March 1st. We're going to be doing a presentation on where we are in implementing that plan. The city council also asked us to bring an update to them regarding the Melrose Triangle. That's been a project that's been ongoing for many, many years, and they've submitted a revision. And so we will be presenting an update to them at the next meeting. So that's my update for today.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of our director at this time? Seeing none, we will move to the item next on our agenda, which is items from commissioners. David, if you could please mute the folks that are not members of the commission. Thank you. So moving on to item number 8, items from commissioners. If we could, I'll just go by the order I see you on my screen, if that's all right with everybody, and start with Commissioner Caballero. And if you have anything for this.
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Buckner. Commissioner Buckner.
I don't understand it.
You-
No.
There you are.
Thank you, Chair. I said it 3 times. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Vincent.
I have nothing. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones.
Yes, I just want to congratulate Commissioner Caballero on his reappointment. We are very, very happy, at least I am. I can't speak for everyone, but I hope I can speak for everyone when I say how very excited I am to, I hope, continue to be working with you. Your expertise is very much appreciated and needed on this commission and in the community. And I'm very, very happy that you'll be continuing a new term. So congratulations. This is probably out of order, Chair, but I did want to request if we could adjourn this meeting in memory of Marquita Thomas's stepfather and grandmother. I believe both of whom passed in the past week. She's had a rough week. And if we could, and I can dig on trying to find names, but I would like to adjourn the meeting in their memory.
I think this is the appropriate time, and their names are James Hightower and Barbara Bisserup. My
Oh,
apologies if
okay.
I'm not
Well, you're way
pronouncing
ahead
that
of me
correctly.
on that. Thank you very much. I appreciate
No,
that.
but I appreciate you saying that, and I believe we can speak for the whole commission in extending our deepest condolences and sympathy to our colleague.
Yeah, as someone who also had two relatives pass away within about a week of each other, while I was serving on a commission, I deeply understand. So my best to Commissioner Thomas and to her family at this time. And thank you, Chair Bass. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Hoopengarner.
Yeah, I would absolutely second what Commissioner Jones has said, and I can only imagine. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I will echo what they said and echo what Commissioner Jones said in being very excited that Commissioner Cavallero was reappointed to this commission. So that's a good thing for West Hollywood.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda would be the consent calendar, but we've moved that and pulled that from consent, so we will discuss it later this evening. And so we will move on to item number 10. 10A is a zone text amendment for on-site alcohol beverage service in the R3C C zone. And I would like to ask for a staff report.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Thank you so much, Chair Bass. My name is Rachel Diamond. I'm the Acting Long Range Planning Manager in the Planning and Development Services Department with the city. And tonight before you, we have a zone text amendment that is related to the R3CC district. Let me just share my screen. Give me just a moment, please. We actually discussed this item previously in November, and the commission had asked that we look at this a little bit more and come back. Effectively, what we're trying to do is allow alcohol service to occur in the R3CC district to allow for the potential and existing small scale neighborhood serving commercial on the ground floor to be successful in their ability to operate, not only during COVID, but also after. And so initially we had looked at both the R3CC and R4BC zone districts as two locations where we wanted to allow alcohol service. But ultimately, after Planning Commission recommendations at the previous meeting, we decided to scale it down to the R3CC district, being that this district is commercial in nature along Fairfax, as well as due to the differing nature of R4BC. So right now, we really scaled it back based on your comments. And so right now, what we're recommending is to allow existing and future restaurants in the R3CC district to have alcoholic beverage service only on site. That's another big change that you'll see from the last meeting. Previously, we had discussed on and off site, meaning for sale when you're eating at a restaurant, but also to go sales for both restaurants and retail. This zone text amendment would only allow on-site beer, wine, and liquor service. A little bit about the R3 district. This district was actually established in 2017 after it was designated as such in the general plan. And a little bit of background about that. I know there's been a little bit of conversation about kind of how did this zone district come about. And ultimately, the city was really looking for unique ways to have mixed use zones, but also to get people to do residential on upper level floors and have kind of a primarily residential project that wouldn't result in an entirely 100% commercial building, as we sometimes see on commercial corridors that are zoned commercially. So as a result, these new residential zones were created, both R3CC and R4BC at the same time, to do something different and to allow for a primarily residential building with ground floor commercial instead of 4 stories of commercial, for example, in order to get more residential onto Fairfax and to allow for these properties to be developed with some residential units on them. Again, they allow commercial on the first floor. There is an FAR limitation of that commercial on the first floor overall. And then there's also a limitation that restaurants can only be 1,200 square feet or less. So there are 14 parcels in this zone. It's fairly small. It's on the east side of Fairfax between Willoughby to the south and the alley just south of Santa Monica Boulevard at the north end. And so you can see along this, this map here, like I said, there are 14 parcels. The parcels are pretty narrow, excuse me, and there's limited curb canopy on this block. The properties behind it are generally 2 to 4 story multifamily, and there are a few single family lots as well behind along Orange Grove. This gives you a little idea of what the street looks like. You know, it's almost all commercial, or I'm sorry, it's all commercial at this point. And there's one restaurant that's operating today that could potentially utilize this zone text amendment in the future. And that's Grain Traders. This is a picture of their business. They're kind of in the middle of the zone. These are actually 3 separate restaurants that have 3 totally separate entrances and 3 separate businesses. I believe there's coffee and ice cream shop and kind of a fast casual food service on the left. And they have some outdoor dining. You can see to the left next to the parking lot. And with COVID, they do have some ability to expand a little bit further into that parking lot. But they would like to serve alcohol. They were not the impetus for this zone text amendment, but they've certainly come on board by saying, hey, we're here and we're also interested in serving alcohol. So you may hear from them today. There was another application for another restaurant on the street, but it was actually withdrawn. So I don't know that we will see Tail of the Pup coming back at this location. That being said, in the future, there could be other restaurants, and we want to treat restaurants fairly in this city and make sure that especially restaurants along commercial corridors are given the opportunity to be successful in their operations and also provide kind of broader restaurant service with alcohol service to the community. So that is where we're at with this. I just want to walk a little bit through the land uses in this area and talk a little bit about the CN1 district. So one of the key things that I really want to point out here, and it's based on the narrowed scope that we've come to you with for this zone text amendment, is that R3CC was previously zoned CN1, and all of these uses were allowed previously. So prior to 2017, you could have a restaurant of any size on these properties, and you could ask for alcohol service. Again, it's not guaranteed because on-site consumption of beer, wine, and liquor required a minor conditional use permit, which is reviewed by the director at a director's hearing. And then off-site sales like liquor stores or wine shops, et cetera, require a conditional use permit that would go to the Planning Commission. When we rezone those properties, they were rezoned, and all of the uses became prohibited for alcohol. Restaurants continued to be permitted, but at 1,200 square feet or less. So what we're proposing is that we continue to prohibit off-site consumption sales. That was a big comment from the commission in order to maintain, I think, the environment that we have adjacent to residential. The concern was kind of over consolidation of alcohol service. So as a result, we're proposing to eliminate that off-site sales and just have sales for on-site alcohol service. And so those would be required to have a minor conditional use permit, which would go to a director's hearing, would be publicly noticed, and it's a formal public hearing. And again, these apply to restaurants that are 1,200 square feet or less. You're not allowed to have restaurants any larger. So these are fairly small scale neighborhood serving restaurants versus large destination locations. One of the other comments that we received at the last hearing was that there was a lot of concern about the adjacency to residential. And we totally understand. And that was the primary reason that R4BC was removed from this conversation, because of their proximity and kind of turning the corner onto side streets off of a major commercial street. There was a lot of concern about that interaction. This district, R3CC, is a little bit different in that you have residential behind the buildings. This is fairly similar to upwards of 30% of the commercial properties in the city that don't have alleys behind them and are directly adjacent to residential properties behind them. And the way that we deal with this is that we treat them we take each case on a case by case basis. So each application comes in and we really look at the individual characteristics that each site provides, of which there are so many. I mean, West Hollywood seems fairly uniform in that it's a gridded city, but at the same time, every lot is so different, particularly when it's related to the proximity to residential and how those two interact. So think, for example, an outdoor dining that's directly adjacent to an apartment window might have more impact, say, than a restaurant that's in the basement or on the first floor facing the street, with residential behind it, for example, which is permitted. So we would want to be able to look at each individual project individually to craft each condition to make sure that we're meeting all of these required findings. So the findings that are on the screen are the standardized findings for all minor conditional use permits and conditional use permits. These are things that all of these projects look at. And like I said, they're general enough that we're able to evaluate every single project based on these findings and are able to recommend conditions that make sure that each project will meet them. And specifically, there are also standards for all sales of alcohol. And so these three, I think, are specifically helpful in crafting conditions as we move forward. And so I did want to point out that we do have these existing requirements that you avoid contributing to an undue proliferation of sales, meaning, are there too many in the area? And would this additional one contribute to an undesirable, character in the city? This is a fairly big one, avoiding any adverse impact on adjacent or nearby religious facilities, schools, parks, playgrounds, and then particularly related to this particular district is avoid disruption of resident sleep between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. through design, operational conditions, and limitations on operating hours when the use is proposed in close proximity to residential uses, and especially to bedroom windows. So what we tend to see is when there's a project that is very close to residential, that they do get conditioned to close at 10 p.m. And then as time goes by, they can come back in and ask for additional hours if there hasn't been any issues. That's typically what staff recommends for people to do so that they can show that there isn't an issue and that they aren't disrupting people already with 10 p.m. And generally what people end up doing as well is provide additional mitigation measures, in some cases, glass walls or other noise barriers that help to limit that interaction between the commercial and the adjacent residential. And then of course, like any mixed use building, which these would be if they have, if they're built new, there are the residents that are directly above these restaurants that we want to think about as well. Typically we're looking outward beyond the lot, but there are also residents living right above. So we're always looking to make sure that restaurants that are serving alcohol are able to mitigate those impacts. So that's specifically why we didn't create more standards for these lots. I could see if they were all exactly the same, being able to be very, very specific about what we want in terms of the alcohol, but they're all so different that nothing fits into one box. And I think particularly when we look at redevelopment potential, we don't know what we don't know, so we want to make sure that we can cover all of those things by remaining to be open, but also to make sure that people are meeting all these requirements that you see on the screen. That is it. I am happy to answer any questions. I think the key thing to remember is that we're really restoring alcohol service to these properties as they were able to do prior to 2017. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Rachel this time? Commissioner Jones and then Commissioner Buckner after that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Rachel. I did want to just, for the record, ask a question about the ability for, in the R3C-C zone, for a potential applicant to combine a lot on Fairfax with a lot on Orange Grove. Are you able to speak to that?
Sure. So we just created regulations a few years ago on projects spanning commercial and residential zone districts, but these are 2 residential zone districts. I think Lauren, can you weigh on this? I don't think that you can combine them, but there may be some ability to. Lauren, you're muted.
I have to unmute twice. John, were you going to weigh in?
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe the answer would be yes. I don't think there's any prohibition currently, since it's the same zone district.
Same type of zone, right?
Right.
So in theory, the lots on Fairfax and Orange Grove could be tied together.
Right, and then they would still need to meet each individual zone district requirement. So you would still, I mean, you could have them attached, but you would still meet the setbacks and have residential only in the Orange Grove side, and then you can have ground floor commercial on the Fairfax side and residential above.
Right, so the
Okay.
the commercial couldn't go on to the residential street.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Buckner?
Thank you. Just because I'm a little confused, Rachel, this isn't the area where we had rezoned. We talked about it when I was on long range a while ago. That was supposed to be a live work situation.
Yeah, there are opportunities for live work in this district, but certainly not a requirement of the units in this district.
But that was our intention at the time when we set this aside as a separate mixed use, right? And we wanted it to be live work. That was my understanding when we talked about it. I see Stacy shaking her head. Yes, so I'm curious as to why all of a sudden there's restaurants there with alcohol use. We were thinking more at the time, at least that's what I thought, that it would be like artists or small business.
So the district was not limited to live work. So it was a district that allowed a variety of land uses, and live work was one of them. And so we weren't being so restrictive that the only thing that could happen there was live work. That was one of the options. And I think there's a lot of discussion that with the lots being small, that might be something that could happen. Right. Not that we were restricting redevelopment to live work. That was an option that would be encouraged and people would like, but not that the city was going to restrict development to that.
Well, we were talking at the time, I remember that we were hoping that it would be sort of a place where artists might go, or people who had small business like a jewelry designer or something like that. And all of a sudden now we have alcohol use and restaurants. And one of them is only 250 square feet. So I don't understand. Is this, let me just ask this one question. Are all 3 of these restaurants in a row operated by the same operator?
They are.
And so why 3 restaurants? Why didn't they just make 1 restaurant? I don't understand.
So there's a limitation where restaurants in this district can only be up to 1,200 square feet. And so they have 3 restaurants that are completely separated. They have their own separate entrances, and they are all less than that 1,200 square feet. So that's what's required of spaces that want to utilize existing commercial buildings. If they wanted, let's say, rent a 4,000 square foot building for a restaurant, the only way to open a restaurant is to either open 1 small restaurant or multiple restaurants within that space, because the requirement was small scale restaurants.
Okay, So is this operator going to get 3 separate CUPs? And does he have to apply for 3 separate alcohol licenses?
Yes. So if they wanted to have alcohol in all 3 spaces, I don't believe they do. But if they wanted to serve alcohol in all 3, they would have to have 3 separate applications for minor conditional use permits. We may have them at the same hearing, but if they applied at different dates, we could hear all 3 separately, and they obviously could be sold separately as well into 3 totally different restaurants with different ownership moving forward.
But he couldn't, the operator could not just get 1 permit, 1 license, and then serve all 3 restaurants just because they're next door.
That's correct. You have to get 3 separate permits. So 3 separate liquor licenses. They're 3 completely separated businesses. They have 3 separate business licenses. All of their permitting was done in 3 separate permits, like building permits and things like that. And all of the administrative processes that occurred for the change in use were all for 3 individual separate projects.
So a customer couldn't go to the bar, let's say in the larger restaurant, which is 1,000 square feet, and which has 250 square feet outside. So it's already 50 square feet larger than we're allowed. And then they couldn't go there and get a drink and then go over to one of the other restaurants next door and take their drink over there, could they?
No, that's against the law in California, regardless of, because they'll have 3 separate licenses and they're not one operational area. So you won't be able to go from one to the next, particularly assuming, let's say only one with the outdoor dining has the liquor license and the other 2 don't, for example, you would not be able to take that alcohol to the other spaces. And so that would be something that we would establish in terms of boundaries. You'd have to delineate the boundary. That's where you typically see like stanchions, delineating an area that you can have alcohol with additional signage so that when someone's leaving, they know they have to leave the alcohol at the space. I did want to note that we allow up to 1,200 square feet, but we also allow 250 square feet of outdoor dining. So that's in addition to that. And I did want to read a standard that's in the zoning ordinance. And this is in 19.06.090 R3CC and R4BC zoning district development standards. This just speaks to your live work question. What they say is the R3CC zoning district allows for the same residential density as R3C and allows for live work units and or ground floor neighborhood serving commercial. So there was a discussion about the reality that it is, kind of one or the other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from staff at this point? Vice Chair Hoopengarner.
Yes, 2 questions. The first is for legal. We seem to be amending a zone text at the request of a specific vendor. And I want to know what the precedent is for this outside of obviously a specific plan or development agreement to amend an entire zone district post facto, especially so after so recently creating and designing the district.
But while Lauren is thinking about that, I do want to reiterate that this is not a result of an applicant asking for alcohol. This is something that we've had on our radar for some time, and also wanted to restore alcohol service to restaurants that had it prior to the rezoning. We certainly knew they were coming in, and but at the same time, we were interested in doing this before that.
Right, so I'll also weigh in. So it's very unusual. I will agree with that. And I think what happened was, we took a look at that area and there's existing buildings in that area that people are wanting to redevelop as the existing buildings, not tearing them down and building new. And so part of this is trying to address allowing existing property owners to utilize their buildings as they could have been used in previous zoning category. The other thing was, as we knew, we knew that the tail of the pup was going to make an application. We were in the pandemic. We were trying to do things to try to help encourage businesses and make things move a little bit smoother. And so that's where we decided to do this as a city-initiated zone text change rather than having property owners apply for it.
Thank you, John. So you make a good point, but I believe the use goes with the land. So if these existing properties were to be redeveloped into the 4-story buildings that they theoretically could be, the license, the ability to, the CUP would disappear because the business would disappear, but the ability to do alcohol licenses would stay with the land.
Well, the land use category of saying they could apply for alcohol would remain, of course, like you said.
But the existing license doesn't carry over. I mean, their liquor license with the state might still exist, but we would start over with the entire development, as you've seen in the past, where everything is treated as brand new. So the liquor, the approval of that land use dies when the building is demolished.
Okay, so last question then. Obviously, these tenants have already invested quite a bit in the infrastructure and the build out of the new TI for these new restaurants. To Rachel's point about the noise that is potentially an additive problem with a new liquor license, what kind of constraints would this put on, since this would be going through staff, what kind of constraints would be put on the applicant and can be put on the applicant via the MCUP or CUP process to address those noise mitigations that weren't necessarily addressed up front in the original TI?
Sure. So I won't speak specifically to this property because I anticipate that they will come in with an application for alcohol should this be approved. And ultimately that determination is made by John Keogh, who is right here. And so generally I want to speak about conditions that are put on buildings like this that have restaurants that are in close proximity to residential. One, to start, tends to be limitation on hours. And that's kind of the primary driver of being able to meet that condition of the quiet hours between 10 to 8 and not limiting people's ability to sleep during those hours. So that's typically where we start with conditions of approval. Where we can go ranges from sound walls for noise mitigation in some cases, and that can range from a landscaped wall to 3-inch thick plexiglass. Which is something that we more typically would see, or maybe 1-inch plexiglass, something we'd more typically see on a rooftop that's projecting sound out. So those are just 2 examples. In some cases, I've seen requirements for white noise to be piped in towards the commercial use to avoid that push of noise over that threshold onto the residential. There are also ways to locate the alcohol use in such a way so that you're limiting the impacts to the residential. Again, I won't speak to this particular property, but if there's an opportunity to put the alcohol use further away from the residential, that's something that we can condition as well. Like I said, for the purposes of the state alcohol and ABC license, they have to show that perimeter of alcohol, kind of where you can go. So that's where the director can weigh in terms of what makes sense to condition in terms of where that location is. And I think the other key.
So I was going to jump in here and just say, so almost all of the alcohol permits for restaurants that I receive are in existing buildings. There are very few are in new construction. So all of them are going to have to figure out how to mitigate that configuration. And so Rachel pointed out several items. Sometimes I've required that the bar area of a restaurant be, no one can stand at a bar. It has to be sit-down service. There's all sorts of things that I can do. And frequently, some of the conditions come from the comments that I receive from residents who show up at the hearings, because it is a public hearing. So I'm not doing it by myself. I'm doing it based on input from residents. So frequently it does come down to restricting hours, making sure the bar isn't really turns into a restaurant, a nightclub type of thing. If there are outdoor issues, like Rachel said, it might be sound walls, that type of stuff. So those are the things that happen at the director's hearing.
One more, I think that's fairly, I always say it's obvious, but it never quite is a requirement to close the windows and doors. It seems so silly, but it's something that can make a huge difference in terms of noise mitigation, is very commonly conditioned on restaurants in West Hollywood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions before we move on to public comment? Okay, seeing none. David, do we have public speakers on this item?
Actually, yes, we do.
Thank you. Could you please lead that portion of the meeting?
Sure, thank you. Before I start, if there's anybody currently in the queue or in the call here that wants to speak on this item that didn't fill out a speaker request form, hit *9 for me at this time, and that'll let me know to call on you at the appropriate time. Our first public speaker will be Daniel Constant, and he will be followed by Ben Mayberg. Daniel, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank goodness we as the community members have the opportunity to address these important decisions. I think there's a wonderful opportunity to enhance the livability of Fairfax in our neighborhood, but there's an equal opportunity to miss the mark. So I was pleased to hear that Tale of the Pup, a destination Instagrammable use, is no longer considering the corner of Willoughby and Fairfax. However, Ms. Diamond indicated that there's a possibility that they may still be interested. If they are, we're very concerned, and I should say, I'm representing my mother, who lives in the 8-unit apartment building at 905 North Orange Grove Avenue, adjacent to this, because we're really not in support of the ZTA as constructed currently for the following reasons. We don't agree that restaurants or fast food selling alcohol typically need less parking and mainly cater to local residents who can walk there. So I would highly urge the Planning Commission to not move in the direction of fast food or destination retail. I also believe the proposed ZTA does not address items like street widening at Fairfax and Willoughby, which is a highly impacted intersection, very narrow. It does not address noise control, given that outside dining seems to be here to stay. And it doesn't, it's vague regarding hours of operation and mitigating noise for housing units and homes that are very close to these parcels, in some instances within 6 feet. We also do not agree with the ZTA characterizing Fairfax as a major thoroughfare. It's never been as major as La Cienega, Santa Monica, Sunset, or La Brea. And as I mentioned, Fairfax and Willoughby is already extremely overburdened. But most importantly, the proposed ZTA is contrary to the intent of the recent rezoning, which upzoned the area with the intent of enhancing the neighborhood vibe and livability with small neighborhood-oriented use, which fast food is not, in particular Tale of the Pup or similar uses. And when I would like Ms. Diamond to clarify if under the previous zoning, restaurants and alcohol serving uses were allowed without providing any parking. We did provide that concession with this upzoning as an to incentivize enhancement and development of more housing. And lastly, the RTA statement only referenced October 22nd support of the project. It didn't reference neighborhood concerns and opposition voiced at the November 5th public hearing. Members of the Planning Commission, please do not approve this ZTA as proposed. There are too many unintended consequences that could diminish the livability of this neighborhood rather than preserve and enhance it. Finally, I think they did do a great job at grain traders. It's exactly the kind of use I would encourage. Not sure if full service alcohol is appropriate in that location though. sincere thanks and good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Our next caller is Ben Mayberg, followed by the phone number ending in 4342. Go ahead, Ben. You have 3 minutes. Ben, are you there? Do *6 to unmute yourself. There you go. Ben, you are unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Okay, there you go. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So I appreciate you all taking the time this evening to meet on this. I think this is a really important and stressful kind of meeting for a lot of us neighbors here because, living next door, we're going to be the ones hearing noise, picking up the trash, and having a hard time parking. And so, as Dan said it, very eloquently, this is going to be a big problem for us. The developers did a great job with grain traders. It's done tastefully. I have nothing wrong with a nice cafe going and coffee shop, live work space. But the last thing I want is a group like Tail of the Pup coming in, an Instagram destination, just like we have on Melrose, many different places where people visit to take pictures and spend time. That's not why I moved to West Hollywood. I don't think that's why a lot of people live in West Hollywood, and specifically in the single family homes directly abutting the property, and in the 8 or 9 unit multifamily north of me, and pretty much up and down the entire block. I've spoken to a lot of the neighbors. We all feel the same way. A lot of them don't know that this meeting is occurring. Some do, some don't. Some couldn't make it. But in my opinion, I think that this would be a huge detriment to the community. We're taxpayers here. And constantly on a daily basis, I'm walking down the street picking up trash. I'm picking up beer cans. I'm picking up just the most foul things that you can imagine off the street. And so I think that the alcohol would promote more of that, not less of it. I think noise is going to be a huge problem. Putting up a landscape wall is, I think, kind of a joke, or a plexiglass wall, especially with the single family house directly abutting the lot on Fairfax and Willoughby. I think that'd be a disaster. And so my other concern here is that who would be enforcing these noise problems or noise ordinances? How does that work? What does that look like? And what happens if it continues? And so who lives
30
with
seconds.
it? And so the problem is that we're living with it, and how does it get enforced? There have been other, major crimes in the area, and homeless issues, and even calling the police doesn't work. And they never come. They just don't show up. And so if we're gonna call in for major problems like that, what's going to happen with the noise? I think that's going to get swept under the rug, and we're going to have a big problem as residents there and taxpayers. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I strongly discourage that we pass this.
Thank you, Mr. Nayberg. Our next speaker is the phone number ending in 4342. If you want to speak, go ahead. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Good evening, general public listening in. My name is Dennis Nelson. I'm the CEO of Grain Traders on Fairfax. I'm kind of conscious that we only have 3 minutes to plead my case. I know I've spoken a little with Rachel since this process started, at least since I've kind of found out about the process late October, early November. We obviously are pro the changes. My approach to looking at it is it gives me the opportunity to at least try to apply for a permit. There's obviously no guarantee that any of my 3 units would get it. And to be honest, I would very unlikely apply across the 3 units. For those that have not been to any of the Grain Traders restaurants, I kind of urge and please welcome you to come along. Feel free to ask to speak to me directly. I'm happy to give you a tour, to give you, an explanation of what we're trying to do. Ultimately the 3 units, as Rachel mentioned, are a coffee shop, a dessert shaved ice cream shop, and she called it a fast casual. We try to call it an elevated casual kind of lunchtime eatery. We obviously have been hit hard by the pandemic. It took us nearly 2 years to get through permits, to build out the project and kind of turn the space into what it is today. We spent millions of dollars doing that. And I appreciate some of the points that were made on the last call about the fact that, we signed the leases and started the project knowing full well that alcohol wasn't permitted within the zone. But needless to say that, that there are a lot of things kind of looking back that we, may have been a little ignorant about or certainly, would have tried to change. And I think allowing us to serve beer and wine would not necessarily significantly deteriorate from our residential neighbors. I have direct contact with the property that is adjacent to us on the north. That's a gentleman called Sheldon. I believe he's also trying to speak on this call. He spoke on the last planning call. I actually have very regular conversation with the property that is east of our outdoor patio seating area, which would be the most impacted by allowing us to serve beer and wine. He comes very regularly for lunch and is often asking us about dinner service. We don't offer dinner because we just can't afford the wastage in the man hours at this point. Allowing us to offer beer and wine would certainly incentivize that. But the type of restaurant that we are, we're talking about opening dinner on Saturdays. I think we
you have 30 seconds.
We launched the first Saturday last week until 8 p.m. We're not a night spot. We're not Isabel across the street. We're really just kind of trying to create a good ambiance, which I hope that Daniel and Ben, who just spoke, kind of recognized. And we just want the ability to apply and have that discretion from the commission, from the public to hear our case. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Mr. Dennis noted that Sheldon Donig was on the call. I do have him here. Sheldon, if you want to speak on this item, go ahead, unmute yourself, *6. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I live in the property next door. And I think when I hear other people talk, they're speaking in generalizations when they're talking about beer cans on the sidewalk and trash. Grain Traders isn't conducive to that at all. I mean, if you've been there, it's kind of organic health food. You're talking about desserts. You're talking about coffee. As far as traffic, they have off-street parking. Fairfax is in effect a commercial street. There's a lot of parking there. I think they're ideal for the location. I think we were really lucky to have them there. It isn't a 3-story building or a 4-story building. It's well managed. The construction and the design is all quality. So there's nothing there that would indicate that you would need police or someone would be rowdy in a dessert, coffee, organic kind of vegetarian restaurant. So I'm 100% for it. I think it's ideal for the location. And I think that they're a total asset. And if a beer and wine license helps them to succeed, the value is there. So like I say, when people talk about police, disruption, beer cans, you need to, if you haven't seen the restaurant, you need to go to the restaurant and form your own conclusion and imagine that situation. It's not a realistic concept. And that's pretty much all I have to say. It's beautifully designed and it is an asset to the neighborhood. And I can't see a reason to constrict them. And when I listened to the meeting last time, people were concerned that liquor stores would move in the neighborhood and that kind of thing. We're talking about one individual business. We're not talking about what's down the street, what's up the street. They're going to have to come to you. So let's deal with that one business, kind of an organic restaurant with dessert, with coffee, with off-street parking, one story, well managed, rather than go into generalizations to try and stop this. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I've been there 20 years.
Yep.
So I know what goes on the street.
You have 30 seconds left.
Well, anyway, I know what goes on the street, and I think they're an asset to the neighborhood. I think you get a better quality business in there, it cleans it up. And that's all I have to say. And I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Donig. Chair, that's all I'm showing in the queue. I do have several public comment forms I do need to read into the record. These came in after the last batch of additional correspondence you received from me at 5 p.m. The first one is from Anchal Chand from Chatsworth, California. And he says, she please allow beer and wine license for Hollywood restaurant Grain Traders. Our next one is from Ruben Morad, West Hollywood. And his statement is, in the brief period Grain Traders has been operating in West Hollywood, it's been more than embraced by a diverse range of residents and workers of the city, many of whom have appreciated its sincere warmth and low-key profile. Its offering of high quality and health conscious dining options are somewhat rare in this particular section of the Santa Monica Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue area. Its large capacity space and inviting layout would support the responsible service of alcoholic beverages in a manner consistent to the relaxed, laid back, and health conscious lifestyle the brand stands for. I can personally vouch for the business ethics and practices of Grain Traders and their positive contribution to West Hollywood. The hospitality industry has been impressed by the standard of their offerings, and the customers have embraced the fresh and unique approach to nutritional meals. In such a short period of time, the company has gained the respect of the hospitality industry for its fine dining level offerings at an affordable, fast casual setup, and the city is extremely fortunate to have such a valuable addition to this part of West Hollywood. Our next one is from Chantel Zarella, West Hollywood. She states, I support Grain Traders getting a wine and beer license. Our next one is from Aaron Luther, Venice Beach. He states, I would like to see permission granted to Grain Traders to provide customers beer and wine. Our next one is just strictly from Unknown of Los Angeles, in support of Grain Traders to sell beer and wine. Our next one is from Ale, West Hollywood, stating, I am here to show my support for Grain Traders being allowed to apply for a beer and wine license. I think they are a wonderful addition to our city, and this will help them to continue to thrive for years to come. Thank you. And our last one is from Julie Wynn, Venice, states, would love for Grain Traders to be able to sell beer and wine. And all the other additional correspondence we've received is, you should have it already, and it is currently also available online. And that's all I'm showing at this time for this item, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. And before we move on to deliberation, I just want to make sure for the folks listening, any decision we make tonight will not grant any business there a liquor license. That would be a hearing in the future if this zone is approved. They could then apply, and then there would be the hearing where people would talk about that. Tonight, it's just about the zoning. And so specifically when somebody mentioned, Mr. Donig, I believe, about generalizations, this is the generalization stage as to what should go on in that particular zone, not with any particular business. So I want to set the stage so people understand our deliberation as we go forward isn't about whether Grain Traders should have a liquor license, but whether that zone should have this change to the underlying zone which would then allow or not allow grain traders to apply. And if I said anything wrong about that, could staff correct me before we go on to deliberations, or did I generally get that correct? They're shaking their head yes, and I see Commissioner Jones looking to.
That's correct.
So I want to start with Commissioner Jones.
Thank you. First, I want to thank staff. I know this has been an item long running. So thanks for answering, all of my questions, and also to the community. I always say this, and it's not a bromide. We can't do this without you. I don't know if we need to do disclosures. I didn't meet with anyone from the business community, but I did meet with someone in the community who actually is a resident on Orange Grove before the hearing. So I want to say, because I think my position is likely to be controversial, just to say outright that I do not have any issues in theory with a business being able to serve alcohol. I'm not a teetotaler, and there's certainly no shame in someone being sober. This is not a judgment call on whether or not someone wants to or can or likes to drink. I also really don't like this being framed by anyone in a way that suggests that us not approving this would not support the business community, because this has historically been a commercial zone. It was zoned for CN1 before the change to R3C-C went through. I think there are two really primary points that I want to narrow in on tonight in my comments, which will likely be extensive, just to preface that and set everybody up here. The first and most important in this case being that the ends here do not justify the means. And what I mean by that is, this has been, I kind of gave a little history before, this was before us the last time, and I'm happy to do that in truncated form now. There was a change, and I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to speak out of turn about why it came to pass or why this was suggested to be a zone other than the one that it was. Again, this was originally zoned to be CN1, which was one-story commercial, which could have been mixed use. And I think one of the things that we talked about extensively when we heard the original request to change this zone, I think it was 4 years ago now, it seems hard to believe, was that this was one of the few places in the city where we would have had an opportunity to do true live work, which is the idea that someone would have a business or like a studio on the first floor, and then would be able to actually live above the unit. So we'll let bygones be bygones. The commission at that time did unanimously approve to reject it. That's been mentioned in the staff report if you weren't able to read it. And council voted 3-2 to move it forward. But again, I just want to remove any notion that this needed to have been, I'm actually not even sure that I understand why it needed to be changed, because it was always a commercial zone. You can still do mixed use in a commercial zone. And now we have a zone that is actually part of our residential zoning code. It's not in the commercial development standards part of our code. And now applicants have the ability to combine lots on Fairfax and Orange Grove, which was my second point. So now we're having a conversation about bringing alcohol into businesses or into a structure with the additional potential of someone being able to purchase a lot on Orange Grove and combine it with a lot on Fairfax. And I just want to note that, once the lots are combined, there is no rear setback. It can be a single building spanning rear lot lines. So now we have a situation where we have the potential for these very large buildings. As I think someone mentioned earlier, the lots on Fairfax they're very small. So the ability for someone to do, a big tall project with lots of subterranean parking is highly unlikely, unless they were going to combine the zone and do a much bigger project, which now with our 3C-C, they can. And I think I take issue with the fact, not just that they would have the ability to do that. And again, I kind of have to get over that because it is what it is. It is our 3C-C, but now we're talking about bringing alcohol into the picture. And we should have been having a conversation about alcohol if this was always meant to be like the plan, we should have had this conversation before. It should have been part of our consideration set when we were talking about the zoning to begin with, and we didn't. So I think, you know, those are my primary issues. Again, like, it's not about harming the business community. This was always a commercial zone, and it's not a commercial zone anymore. It's a residential zone. I do have a couple of other comments, but I think, you know, largely it is interesting to me that, you know, 2 residents on Fairfax are the ones who spoke up about like really not wanting this. I mean, I just want to say, like, someone could offer to buy your residential lot on Orange Grove for whatever price, and combine it with a lot on Fairfax and serve alcohol out of it, even if it is just on the Fairfax side. And I just think this is setting a precedent, and I use that term very intentionally, that we do not want to go down. This is, in essence, spot zoning. It seems, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and again, I'm not going to speak out of turn about from whence this came, but it does seem interesting that, you know, these changes have been made to a zone that would have been perfectly suited to stay as it was, and these businesses like grain traders would have been able to apply for an alcohol permit. It's like, it just seems crazy to me, the way that we're doing it. This is not how we make policy in the city. It's, in essence, retroactive and piecemeally. And in my mind, I think, and I will make some suggestions for you know, changes I think we could make, or conditions I think we could make, but, you know, I just don't want to set this precedent. If somebody wants to combine lots and serve alcohol in Fairfax, they can apply for a site-specific plan, in my mind. It just sets a really dangerous precedent. I think, because I want to be a reasonable and flexible person, there are a couple of different suggestions that I have in terms of conditioning this item. As you know, I will say this, you know, again, I'm always open to discussion on these items. I don't want to be super rigid about it. I just think we need to be really careful about the way that we make policy in this city, because again, it just seems very strange to me that we would be doing this in this order, and that alcohol wouldn't always have been part of the conversation here. So one of the thoughts I had was the potential for, you know, if someone does want to, you know, combine lots and serve alcohol out of a project, because guys, this isn't just about grain traders, and this has permutations that go far beyond grain traders. There are going to be new buildings and new projects that sprout up on this part of Fairfax, and I have to be accountable, and we have to be accountable to the people who are going to be living in those buildings and who are going to be operating all out of those buildings. So, you know, this isn't just about the people who are already there, whether it's in a commercial capacity or in a residential capacity. This is also about stuff that's not there yet. So we have to be careful about rules for people who may be coming in. One of the thoughts I had was to, you know, condition things such that if someone wants to serve alcohol, they can't combine lots. So that would not be allowed. So that's one thought I had. I also don't so much know, it wasn't my takeaway from the last meeting, and I did review my notes extensively, that we didn't want like the ability for offsite alcohol. I mean, as part of COVID, I think it's been one of the small joys of maybe one of the great joys of my life, that I'm now able to get alcohol delivered from some of my favorite restaurants, delivered to my door. So whether it's in a, you know, a delivery capacity, or even if it is like a liquor store. I know there's lots of conversations about liquor stores. I also live off of Sunset, and there's like 4 within, you know, football's throw, not that I could throw a football that far, but somebody could, you know, of my apartment. So again, I want to be, you know, respectful of kind of all parties and work toward a solution here. But I also want to be really careful about the way that we're having the conversation about this, because I know that not everyone who's on the commission currently was on the commission when we originally had this conversation, of which LibWork was a significant part. I remember us talking about that a lot. So, you know, those are my thoughts. I may have some more things to add later, but I just want to be clear about the connotations for what this zoning district allows and what bringing alcohol into it would mean for the commercial and residential tenants and residents of this part of the city. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Jones. Who would like to go next? Commissioner Buckner? I thought I saw you raise your hand. I'm sorry. You're on mute.
Okay. Commissioner Jones articulated pretty much what I've been thinking. I think my questions earlier to Rachel, I guess, was a forward to that. There's really nothing that I have to add. I'm just very concerned about the fact that we're changing things back from where we originally had. Why did we change it in the first place? I don't understand. And it seems like we're doing this to accommodate. I understand restaurants are there, and I know we're not dealing with the license right now. We keep talking about wine and beer only. Even the operator is saying wine and beer. So why would we even think of an alcohol license that might include hard liquor? I'm glad that the staff has changed it so that there's no off-site alcohol. That is something that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, but I'm very concerned about the precedent that we're setting there. And frankly, I was very excited about the idea that these small spaces would be a live work thing, and we'd have like a little maybe artist community or people that are designers and working, out of their homes, so they'd have a live work. I don't remember talking about any other kind of commercial activity going on there, but maybe I'm just not remembering. So that's all I have to say at this point. I'd like to hear from other commissioners, though.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Caballero.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Thank you, Commissioner Buckner. Commissioner Jones, those comments were really great. And I mean, for me, I thought the particulars of the staff report were really well laid out. I like the restrictions and the guidelines that are being proposed. And for me, having spent a lot of time on Fairfax, is like the difference between the east side of Fairfax and the west side of Fairfax is significant. I go to the pet store on the west side of Fairfax and it's clean. But if I go to Aesop on the east side of Fairfax, it's a completely different experience. So for me, it's like, how do we make Fairfax a great experience for everyone living in the vicinity, visiting the area? It is a major thoroughfare. I mean, it is a busy street, maybe not as busy as La Cienega, but it is a busy street and it has a lot of potential. And how do we get there? Like Commissioner Jones mentioned, the possibility of tying a residential lot with a commercial lot is problematic in the sense that someone could design a paseo through this big block building, and all of a sudden you have people who are, not partying, because I don't see it. It's not a nightclub. It's not, it's not San Vicente or Santa Monica between San Vicente and Doheny. It's not that. But in a residential area where, things are quiet early in the evening and a group leaves the restaurant, it can be disruptive. So I like the idea of conditioning this, if we can condition it, that the idea that Commissioner Jones had, that we limit alcohol licenses if someone is trying to tie a lot. I think that's a really great suggestion. I also was thinking that given sort of the complexity of the site, and we have struggled with this over now these two meetings, and long range has obviously discussed it extensively, that though I like what staff has put out in the staff report, that we have these things come to Planning Commission, especially that we have them come to Planning Commission for approval, not stop at the director's level. Just so, and I understand that the director's level is a public hearing and is noticed, but I think given our concern over these last meetings, and as we've discussed this, I think that would be another condition that I would be in favor of, that I would like to see implemented.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Vincent.
Yeah, I'm listening intently to Commissioner Jones and Buckner. I was not on the commission when this area was rezoned and everything that went on during that. I am, concerned. I do have the same concerns that my fellow commissioners have shared. I think adding some of these conditions to where you can't combine the lot, and be able to apply for a liquor license. I also thinking, maybe we can add the condition of beer and wine only, and not do hard liquor. I feel like that's a compromise if we want to go that route. Those are my only thoughts.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Hoopengarner.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Jones. I think you gave a good recap of the history of this, which is long and winding. I want to reiterate what Commissioner Chair Bass said to the public. I want it to be very clear that we are not speaking to any one business. We are speaking to an entire set of properties that runs from Santa Monica Boulevard to Willoughby down the length of Fairfax on the east side. That is a specific zone. We are being asked to make a decision about that zone in entirety, in perpetuity, effectively. While a decision could be changed, in the future, these kinds of decisions don't get changed very often. So I wanted to be very clear that we're talking about the conditions that we're setting up and looking into the future about what could happen with these conditions. And I think that Commissioner Jones touched on this, and Commissioner Caballero. And remember, especially with the housing bonuses, I believe these properties could go to 4 stories. 4 stories, and imagine a developer tying 3 properties on Fairfax to 3 properties on Orange Grove and going up 4 stories and building restaurants in the ground floor that are open with a paseo into the commercial neighborhood, and there's nothing to restrict it. This zoning is going to be this is one component of all of that zoning that's already in place. So I try and look into the future to the extent that I can when I do my deliberations as to what are all the possibilities that could come up. We try and do a little preventative medicine here. And so I like Commissioner Jones' suggestion. I'm not sure how that would work. Legal can speak to if you've already got a property with a conditional use permit and then it gets expanded, can that conditional use permit be rescinded because now they've tied the lots? Legal can maybe speak to that.
It's difficult to answer hypothetical questions, but the general rule with CUPs is that they give the holder a vested right to continue that operation. If something changed with the operation, they might need an amendment. But generally speaking, these CUPs, run with the land and can't be revoked unless the grounds for revocation, violating conditions, things like that are at play.
Exactly. So to the residents, again, I will second Commissioner Jones. We have shared many a lovely glass of wine over a lovely meal in our neighborhoods. I have absolutely zero objection to a beer and wine license in a commercial district. But to the original vision for these properties and what they are currently zoned for, and the potential to spill over into the neighborhood, given the context of the properties as they are, I just feel that unless we can come up with some really good mitigations, we're setting up a series of conditions that is really, to Commissioner Jones' point, a not an excellent precedent. And I would love to be able to support this business, but this decision is not about this business. And as a commissioner, I feel it's really important that I divorce myself from the really real wish to support this local business, especially in these COVID times, and say, gee, let's just let it slide because it's tough times and they need a liquor license. But it won't be tough times forever, and we will be living with this decision forever, and so will all of the neighbors of this property. So that's how I am deliberating about this in my own mind. And I'm more than open to suggestions of, you know, how we could mitigate this in this resolution and this proposed conditions. But that's where I stand right now.
Thank you very much. I want to, we don't do disclosures generally on zone text amendments, but I do want to disclose that like many of the people who spoke from the public, I too live in this neighborhood. I live at the corner of Ogden and Romaine, which is just one block off of these areas that we're discussing. And as a month-to-month renter with no financial interest, I don't have any conflict from participating in this conversation, but I do think it informs my view to some degree of this area, because it's, I mean, I'm literally there every single day. You know, I think about walking my dogs up and down Orange Grove, which I do at least 6 or 7 times a week, and don't see beer cans and garbage all over the ground. And maybe that's because the neighbors that spoke clean it up before I get there in the morning, but I don't see that. So I'm there, it's my neighborhood. And I would say that I support staff's recommendation. I like the idea of maybe limiting it to beer and wine. I really appreciate that staff took out the offsite, because I believe that a lot of the things that were discussed in the public comment about beer cans and rubbish and those sorts of things tend to come more from somebody going to a liquor store than they would from somebody having a glass of wine with dinner at a small restaurant. I think that there's a very big difference between those two. So I do appreciate that. And I think that cleans this up a lot. I also recognize that we only allow restaurants on the bottom floor, as I understand it, of these. So, you know, discussion of them going to 4 stories, it's not like we're going to have a rooftop bar with one of these businesses. So generally speaking, you know, this is Fairfax and Santa Monica. It's one of the most major intersections in our city. It's where almost every one of the proposals for the new subway is suggesting there's going to be a subway stop. So we're talking about businesses that people are going to be getting off the subway and having, you know, something to eat on their way home from dinner at some point. You know, when we're speaking about the future, help us that we actually get that subway line. So I think this is exactly right. And I'm kind of the mindset that you know, the ship has sailed on live work. And I understand that was kind of a hope, but we're seeing that's not what's actually coming to fruition in this area. And even if there are live work, you know, if that's what somebody wants to do, I think that this zone encourages that. But if what we're actually seeing are these small restaurants and similar sorts of businesses, that we need to make sure that those are successful. I believe, you know, I too have taken advantage of the fact that restaurants can deliver alcohol now during COVID. I don't see why that, I don't think that's the same as offsite sales because it's a specific COVID condition. But, you know, we're talking about a major intersection, a major city, and not allowing alcohol sales on one of these major thoroughfares, one of these corridors, just doesn't make sense to me. I think it was an oversight, and I was on the commission when we voted on this. I don't recall us discussing it, so I don't know that there was any deliberate decision not to include alcohol. I believe I was under the impression, and I would have to go back and look at notes to see where I was exactly, but I think I was under the impression that businesses would be able to sell alcohol, and that I'll take full responsibility for not noticing that. But you know, I didn't notice it. The city council, my colleagues here, staff, no one seemed to recognize that because it didn't come up as part of the discussion at any one of those stages. So I do think it was an oversight. I think it's right to put it back in. I'm amenable to some of these conditions to make it better, but I right now I would support staff's recommendation as is, but I really like the getting rid of the liquor portion and keeping it to beer and wine. But I don't think that we are all on the same page, so I'd love to see if we can get there. So let's go back to Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Commissioner Bass. Okay, we've heard from everyone. I think this is helpful. So I don't want to die on this hill. So I'd like to see how amenable the rest of commission is to moving this forward to council with a recommendation with a couple of different conditions on it that I think would help. Again, I really don't like the way that this whole kind of the way that we're making the sausages here has gone down. It's not the way that we make good policy in the city. I don't like it. I think it stinks. I'm just going to say it. And I'm not going to attribute that to any one party. It's been, the general plan, I believe, was approved in, or the last time we finished it was 2011. So it's been, 10 years now. So for the record, I don't like it, but I think moving on, what I would like to suggest is that we move this forward to council. But I'd like to make two conditions, and these are important and I think would be vital to me being able to support, and please let me know your thoughts on it. One, that if someone wants to combine a lot, whether it's a lot that they own that's existing on Orange Grove or Fairfax or otherwise, that they cannot apply for an alcohol license. That's one. Two, that if someone does apply for an alcohol license, that it has to come before Planning Commission for a full public hearing, as opposed to just a director's level hearing. So I'd love to hear the other commissioners' thoughts about.
I support that. I would second that if that was the motion.
Commissioner Buckner?
I would support that too, but I want to ask Lauren Langer if we could condition it and say that only alcohol and beer would be served in those restaurants or in that space, or do you have that's not up to us because it's alcohol, it's a alcohol license.
Sir, did you say beer and wine versus alcohol, liquor? We can separate those because they're actually listed as two separate uses. So we could allow just beer and wine.
I would like to add that condition, and then I would be willing to support Stacy's.
Can I ask, given the hours, the proposed hours of operation, which I do think are pretty reasonable, why anyone would be opposed to us doing alcohol in addition to like spirits in addition to beer and wine? I'm not opposed to like tavern style, which is just beer and wine, but I don't know. I guess I'm open. I have favorite restaurants that do one or the other, but I'm just curious to know. I think of like a Connie and Ted's vis-a-vis like a Zinc, which Zinc only serves beer and wine. Connie and Ted's has a full bar, to list some like, West Hollywood institutions that are on boulevards.
Yeah, Isabel across the street has a full bar, and that side of the street is clean and doesn't have any issues. I don't understand the methodology with just going wine and beer. I mean, I do, but I don't see it as being a problem.
I would agree that if you want a screwdriver instead of a, Cabernet, I don't see a difference. But I agree with Sue though, that the hours of operation, help really mitigate some of the real issues around alcohol. And that would be a deal breaker for me, is the hours of operation. And so I don't have any heartburn over the addition of alcohol, but I would agree with Commissioner Jones' two conditions.
I want to understand the conditions just to make sure. Are you suggesting if they combine lots on Fairfax, just two adjacent lots on Fairfax?
No, not adjacent lots on Fairfax. If they want to combine a lot on Fairfax or lots on Fairfax with a lot or lots on Orange Grove on the street behind.
Cross zoning, if you will, moving into a different zone.
That's where my confusion was, and I was going to oppose it if it was together in Fairfax, because I think you could come up with a better project.
It's not for lots on Fairfax. It's for lots on that would cross the R3C and R3C-C zones. Yes, correct.
Cross zoning.
That would cross zones. Okay. Mm-hmm. That I'm much more comfortable with. I wouldn't personally include that condition, but I could support a motion to that to that effect, as long as it's not within the same zone.
Just to
Rachel?
clarify really quick, Commissioner Jones, your second condition would be that if someone applied for an alcohol license in R3CC, that it would go before the Planning Commission.
Yes.
So rather than call it an MCUP that goes before the Planning Commission, do we want to just call it a regular conditional use permit then, which generally goes before the Planning Commission?
I think that perhaps that's the way to use the language, and Ms. Langer can speak
Yeah.
to this, that we prohibit an MCUP and only allow a CUP, and that gets us to Planning Commission.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable
I
with
was
that.
thinking along the same lines.
I just really want to
Rachel,
make
did
sure
you-
that the community, oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
That's okay. I think Rachel may have had some thoughts about the combining the lots and a way to articulate it. Did you want to address that?
Sure. I think the way that this this first condition is written would actually help to address not combining the lots between the Fairfax side and the Orange Grove side. An alternative that we were looking at behind the scenes was to limit the size of the lot that could apply, that where a business could apply for an alcohol license. But frankly, I think the concern with that lot size maximum would be that it would limit people from combining lots along Fairfax. And it sounds like that's not what you want to limit. So I think that this actually may be another way that we can do this more effectively for your goal of not allowing lots that combine the two to apply for an alcohol license. And I don't want to be clear too that this would still allow you to combine those lots, but once combined and a new building is put there and a restaurant is there, they would not be allowed to apply for an alcohol license.
And Rachel, no restaurant can be over 1,200 square feet ever, no matter how many commercial lots you combine along Fairfax.
That's correct.
And the hours will always be at 10, but you mentioned that they could come back if they were compliant on a long-term basis.
Well, that's typically what tends to happen, is that people will be limited pretty severely in their hours, and then based on their proximity to residential and that condition that they not limit sleep between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. And then, for example, a restaurant that's completely inside and facing far away from the residential has a good track record, and they're not disrupting the neighbors, they would come back and ask for an amendment to that conditional use permit.
Okay.
Did the beer and wine condition get included in this motion thus far?
I don't think I see a
Sue had
majority
proposed
for that.
it. I mean, again, I'm open to discussion, but
By the
If
way,
we don't have a second, I will second your motion, Stacy.
yeah, I didn't have an issue with that. By the way, I do drink alcohol, I have no thing, and I don't like beer, and I hardly ever drink wine. So it was just a thought. So I thought I would let you know that.
Was that a yes? To limit it to beer and wine? Was that
No.
I think we
No.
don't want to limit it to beer and wine.
Okay. Okay, so right now it's just changing MCUP to CUP for both beer and wine and hard liquor. And then, Rachel, I'm wondering in the land use category, if we just, that's where we could, in table 2.2, if we could put maybe with
CUP.
note 11. Well, yeah, but also putting the limitation on the CUP is not available for a lot that's combined with a lot behind it.
That's perfect.
where I would
That's
put the
actually
language.
perfect. So we'll include, instead of MCUP, it'll state CUP for both of those categories. And then a note 11 will read, alcohol licenses are not, or conditional use permits for alcoholic beverage service are not permitted on properties that combine R3CC lots facing Fairfax with residential lots on Orange Grove.
Well, I would reference the zoning on that, which is what, R3C?
Yes, R3C lots on Orange Grove. Thank you.
So I believe that was a motion by Commissioner Jones and a second by Commissioner Cavallero. Is there any further discussion from any of the commissioners? Then I will ask our secretary, David Gillig, to call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vinson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hoopengarner,
Yes.
Chair Bass,
Yes.
and the motion passes 6 ayes, 1 absent. There is no appeal process. This is a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Buckner,
Can we take a 10-minute break, please?
seeing no objections, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back here. My clock says 8:12. At 8:22, we'll start up again. we'll get started just as soon as all the commissioners are back. Commissioner Buckner, are you there? I saw you a moment ago, but I'm not seeing you now.
Yes, I'm here. I went to get a tissue.
Great. I didn't want to start without you.
Thank you.
David, are you ready?
Yes, Chair, we're good to go.
Okay, great. So we will reconvene the meeting and move on to our next item, which is also a public hearing for a zone text amendment. 10B, zone text amendment driveway grade standards for solid waste. David, do we have any speakers on this item?
No, I'm not showing any speakers for this item at all right this time.
Okay.
If there is anybody on the line that would like to speak, please hit *9 at this time, and we'll take your comments at the end of this public hearing.
Great. So we can have a staff report on this, and I imagine it won't be quite as lengthy of a conversation as the last item, but we'll see. These folks surprise me sometimes.
Don't tempt us. Don't tempt us, Chair.
Every time I say that, I'm wrong, so I really shouldn't. But well, I'll turn it over to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bass, commissioners, and members of the public at home. Again, my name is Rachel Diamond. I'm the acting long-range planning manager, and I'll keep my presentation really brief because this is fairly simple this evening. So, just to summarize, we have two standards for driveway grades for multifamily residential buildings in the city of West Hollywood. One is the base standard, and it says you're allowed to have a driveway grade of up to 20%. It's pretty standard in Los Angeles. We found that they work very well and that we don't have any issues with those driveway grades. Then we have standards for trash storage within garages. And those requirements say that if you want to store your trash inside the garage, which is fairly typical in the city of West Hollywood, that you can only have a driveway grade of 15%. So what happens to the buildings that have between a 15 and 20% slope in their driveway to get to their garage? They end up building mechanical lifts to basically haul up the trash at grade and come out. And I'm sure many of you have seen this in the past. Our trash hauler, Athens, they take a scout truck, they bring it inside the garage, and they pull out the bin. And then the main trash truck comes and empties the bin. And the scout truck kind of looks like a pickup Ford F-150 type truck, pulls the trash bin back into the garage. When we spoke to Athens, they agreed that they can absolutely handle a 20% grade with those scout trucks. And we would much rather trash be inside garages rather than outside. While some people build those mechanical lifts, they're really expensive, particularly for a smaller building that is narrow in scope in terms of the lot size. So you tend to need that steeper grade to get into the garage. Those buildings will end up storing their trash outside instead with some sort of screening, which creates kind of a bigger burden on the street side of the property or in an alley when present. But effectively, we can have the same standard for both. So basically, all we're asking tonight is to change that standard for trash service to allow for driveways up to 20% in slope to have storage of trash inside the garage. I'm available for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And do any of the commissioners have questions at this point? And I'm guessing, David, no one has spoken up for public comment on this item? Is that correct?
No, it looks like we are all clear.
I'll move the item, Chair.
Second.
Any further discussion? Then, David, could you please call the roll? I was right for once.
Thank you. Thank you. Vice Chair Hoopengarner?
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner?
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Vinson,
Yes.
Chair Bass,
Yes.
and the motion passes 6 ayes, 1 absent. There is no appeal process. This is a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more public hearing on a zone text amendment for no net loss of housing in R2 district. That's item 10C. Can we have the staff report on that?
Good evening once again. Thank you, Chair Bass and commissioners, those of you at home. I am standing in for another one of our planners, Brian Eck, this evening. Basically, again, to keep this really simple, state law requires that you have no net loss in dwelling units on a site when you redevelop. And we believe that that applies to the R2 district. When you have a duplex and you demo that building, you're required to build 2 units back. However, when you build back 1 unit, not plural, there seems to be a little bit confusion among the public with whether that state law applies. And so while we believe that that state law already applies, where you can have no net loss in units, we're having some pushback from the development community that states that there is a loophole that would allow them to just build a single family home after demolishing a duplex. We are very concerned about the loss of units, and we see a lot of that transition from duplex to single family throughout the region. And it is concerning, particularly when we're trying to maintain existing units as well as and build new units in the city. So as a result, we really just want to clarify, this actually isn't a policy change. It's just a clarification to make sure everyone understands that there is a no net loss allowance here. If you have a single family home on an R2 lot, you would be able to build another single family home. But if you have a duplex, you would have to replace it with a duplex at a minimum. That's really the crux of it. It's fairly simple. Again, this is really just making sure that our zoning ordinance really aligns with what the actual policy is, so that there's absolutely no confusion when you're replacing with 1 unit. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Buckner.
Yes, okay. I'm just concerned because in the staff report, it says that the state has not yet made this change, that you're anticipating that it's going to happen. And it seems like we're making a change that has not actually become law yet for the state.
Perhaps the staff report has an error in it because this is state law. Let me just pull that up to confirm, but just to clarify, this is already state law and what we consider to be our law as a result.
It says there's an indication that any ambiguity related to this will be removed by the state legislature this year. Any change made by the legislature is likely to not become law until January 1, 2022. So it looks like we're doing this, making this proposed change because there's been some confusion in our city among developers, but we're making it ahead of state law, which is not usually what we do. We usually write our code to comply with state law. So I'm thinking this is jumping the gun a little bit.
I'll actually jump in there because I've personally had conversations with the lawyers at HCD and with Senator Skinner's office, who wrote SB 330, and it was absolutely their intention that there is no net loss of units, no matter what zone you're in. That was the purpose of the Housing Crisis Act. And so you get developers coming in with creative arguments and these loopholes that if they're only replacing it with a single family home, that they can somehow skirt the rule, but that wasn't the intent. And so the senator's office is looking into clarifying it. But it was the whole bill is about no net loss. And I think the bill says when you're in a hole, you stop digging. And that's the point. We don't want to lose any units. We just want to maintain and build.
I understand, but it's still, we're going ahead of state law, which is not usually what we do, even though that's the intent.
No, so there's an existing state law that says no net loss.
Right.
But there's a weird language issue that seems to come into question. The state has already given us their opinion that we're already following the state law as is. But the same way we're clarifying our regulations, they want to clarify just to close that. There's literally an S that could be changed into parentheses that would help that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood what was going on here. Thank you very much for the clarification.
I just want to add one other thing, that we already have this rule for R3 and R4. It's been a city policy for many years. It just hasn't been perfectly articulated for R2.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any additional questions? Then David, do we have any public speakers on this item?
No, Chair, I'm not showing anybody that would like to speak on this item.
And Chair, I would move this item at the risk of going 2 for 2.
And I'll second.
Great. Seeing no further discussion, I will ask David to call the roll.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hoopengarner,
Aye.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Vinson,
Yes.
Chair Bass,
Yes.
and motion carries 6 ayes, 1 absent, and there is no appeal process. This is also a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Next item on our agenda is number 11, 11A, an amendment to the Sunset Arts and Advertising Project Subcommittee upcoming meeting dates. We have a staff report on that? Who's handling this item?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Chair Bass, aren't we supposed to be addressing the item that was originally on consent now before we go on to that?
That's item number 13, excluded consent. This is item number 11.
Okay, all right. You're right. Okay. Seems backwards though.
Hi, Commissioner. So what we're looking for is to add some additional dates to this and extend this subcommittee. And I'm just pulling up the report. I believe we want to extend on the same schedule moving into the future. We can do another 3 months of that with the once a month meeting. Is that something the commission is willing to move on?
I'll move. I know that our February meeting was canceled and I thought we had items coming forward. So it sounds like it's, born out of necessity. So I'll support, as many meetings as we need to get through.
Before you move this, do we have to ask if there are public speakers on the item, since I don't imagine many people have an opinion on this?
Yeah, no, we have no public speakers.
Okay.
Chair, could I just make one modification, and it's a suggested modification I'd like to make to both design review and SASE. And that is that we, instead of meeting at 5:30, out of deference to the public, who is many of them still working, that we convene these particular meetings at 6 p.m.
I believe that changing the time might be a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have to do noticing and all of that, but I just want it on the record that I'd like us to consider it and address it sooner rather than later.
We can certainly look into that and follow up with how we can proceed with that.
Without objection from my colleagues, but I just feel like it would serve the community better and be more transparent.
Mr. Buckner, you had?
Yeah, Commissioner Hoopen, are you talking also about design review starting at 6?
Yes. I mean, I'm open to discussion, but I would just like to consider that 5:30 is still very early, even for people who are working from home, who are still working, to participate in the public process. And I think, especially given that people are not having to drive, but 6 o'clock would seem to be more equitable and more available to the community.
May I offer a suggestion that we, because design review is not on the agenda tonight, we can't really talk about that subcommittee, but I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Hoopengarner, for what it's worth, but perhaps we have new appointments to the commissions coming up in like July or something like that. And that's probably, I mean, we'll probably be on Zoom. I can't imagine any scenario where we won't be on Zoom, which makes it a little bit more available to people earlier in the day. I would tend to think. So I think maybe as an item when we discuss subcommittees, again, in like July, that might be the like very best time to talk about that as a bigger item. And by then we will know the full makeup of this commission going forward for the next 2 years as well. That would be my suggestion, that we approve staff's request tonight on this one item, and then you know, maybe staff can address that in that time frame, if that's amenable to people.
Again, it's just a suggestion on my part as a way of making things more transparent. There are a lot of moving parts I appreciate on this decision.
Okay. Do we need to vote on scheduling those then? I think I was told earlier we have to take a roll call on everything. So David, I heard Commissioner Jones make a motion. I'm happy to second it. And if we could call the roll on staff's recommendation to continue this for 3 more months. Continue the meetings, not continue the item.
Right, the Sunset Arts Subcommittee meetings will be continued on the same schedule through June 10th of 2021. It'll be the second Tuesday of every month until June. Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Chair Bass?
Yes.
Commissioner Vinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hoopengarner?
Yes.
And motion passes, 6 ayes, 1 absent. The meeting agenda for the Sunset Arts and Advertising Subcommittee is amended as presented.
Thank you very much. Next item is number 12, unfinished business. We have none. And so we will move on to item number 13, which is excluded consent calendar, which we pulled item number 89, or item number 9A, which is 8920 Sunset Boulevard. It is a receive and file item on our agenda tonight, but Commissioner Hoopengarner and Commissioner Jones, Vice Chair Hoopengarner and Commissioner Jones asked to pull this. I don't know that we need much of a staff report since it's a receive and file, but they wanted to discuss it. So following council tradition, will turn it over to the 2 of them to whoever wants to go first on discussing concerns.
Commissioner Hoopengarner, have at it. You're muted.
Mouse takes 2 clicks. Jennifer, we spoke about this morning. My concern is that as presented, this is stating that the original approval of a 6-tier full valet, fully automated parking system, which was what went through the negative declaration of the EIR, was what was included in the traffic studies, it was included in all the public conversation, is now being proposed to be modified to be replaced with an automated tandem parking system that's only 4 stories with a full valet system. And I am having a little hard time wrapping my head around how that's going to work and what the implications are for the flow of traffic, which we've already identified in that particular location as to be particularly challenging. And without plans or any additional information, and it's a little hard to discuss. And furthermore, it seems more than minor to me, and therefore to me would require coming back for a full public process. So if you could address both of those subjects, and Commissioner Jones, if you have anything else to add to that.
Thanks, Commissioner Hoopengarner. I think really, I just, again, considered some of these changes to be, especially, you know, this has been a somewhat controversial project in the city. It did come before there was I'm sorry, I'm suffering from somewhat of like early onset dementia from having been in the same space 23 hours a day for the last year. So words are failing me a little bit this evening, specific vocabulary words in particular. But there was a ballot, a measure that was brought forth for this. And I just, whatever political forces were at play there, I think I would feel more comfortable if this was subject to a more comprehensive review in terms of public process. You know, nothing, I think most of these do seem fairly minor, like the cap, but I did also have concerns about the parking. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that the public has an opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on a couple of those things, and I'm going to turn it over to Doug Fu, who's the project planner, to fill in some of the details. First of all, we have, as we've talked about on this commission, yeah. Oh, am I?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
am I muted?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just wanted to. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did wanted to fill in terms of what Commissioner Jones was saying. Is this back to noticing and transparency on this public process? And to my knowledge, the public was not noticed on this. And obviously, if staff considers it a minor modification, no noticing is required. But I reached out to the head of the neighborhood association that had been involved in this project, and she was completely unaware of any of these modifications. And so if you could speak to that as well.
Sure. Okay, so again, I'm going to touch on some of the procedural items, and then I'll let the planner fill in some of the detail. So as we've talked about, we have a series of findings that determine whether a modification or an amendment to a project is major or minor. And, you know, we went through those.
Jennifer, we lost you. We lost the sound.
Jennifer, we can't hear you either.
That's why we wanted to bring it here, so that there is more, like you mentioned, a minor amendment doesn't have a noticing requirement. So we wanted to make sure that we're trying to
Jennifer,
make a.
We lost an entire minute.
Speaking, I'm sorry.
Jennifer, we lost an entire minute of your speaking. You went completely silent.
We're trying to make as transparent a process as we can in this case. So, Doug, if you can take over and answer some of those specific questions about the evaluation on the garage portion.
Doug,
Sure.
before you start, we did miss some of what Jennifer had to say. So if you can fill in the blanks, or we can go back to Jennifer when you're done.
Sure. Yeah, I think what Jennifer stated, and we weren't able to hear her, is that you know, when this application was filed, you know, staff, you know, in consultation with the director, found that the amendments, you know, were minor in scope, because they complied with the criteria under the zoning code for a minor amendment, and so we proceeded, you know, with approving it at the staff level. However, you know, the code does, you know, allow the commission the ability to call this for review if you believe that that staff was in error in making this decision for whatever reason. And so, you know, the code provides that, you know, within 10 days, you know, after the director approves a minor amendment, any member of the planning commission can call this item for review. And at the next scheduled meeting, the entire commission will vote as to whether or not the item would be brought back for full discussion. And so that's the whole reason why, you know, we are bringing it to the commission this evening is to provide you with the discretion and ability to call it for review if you feel that is appropriate. But in terms of the question that Commissioner Hoopengarner had about the traffic, so as part of the EIR, the traffic consultant estimated that the peak hour demand for the parking garage during the evening time would have a total of 160 vehicles or 160 transactions. And so based on, you know, the research that the applicant conducted with the parking consultant for this new system, they determined that, you know, the system that they're proposing would be able to accommodate that same maximum capacity or maximum transaction of 160 vehicles during the evening peak hour. So, and also just to let you know, the applicant is here this evening as well, and would be able to provide you with, you know, more information if you need to.
Doug, can you elaborate on how staff came to the conclusion that reducing the number of levels of parking warranted a minor change? I understand typographical issues being minor, that I think everyone can understand why that would qualify as minor, but could you talk us through the determination, that process that you go through to determine that the change with the parking was a minor change?
So under the code, the criteria that needs to be met in order for an amendment to be considered minor would be whether or not it would result in significant neighborhood or environmental impacts, whether it constitutes a change to the project's approved use or design, whether it constitutes a change to the basis on which the final EIR was certified, or whether it constitutes changes to the findings in which the project was approved by the commission and subsequently by the city council. And so, you know, as I detailed in the conditions of approval that are part of the staff report as Exhibit A, you know, staff made the determination that based upon what they were proposing, that it didn't rise to the level of being, you know, a major amendment. But with specific regard to the parking, I mean, what we have here is a reduction from 6 parking levels to 4 parking levels, which would result in less construction, you know, less excavation, less construction impact to the neighborhood. However, the same amount of parking spaces will be provided, 351 spaces, so that's not going to change. And what previously was approved was a fully automatic garage system, whereas now what the applicant is proposing is a fully automated valet system. So during peak hours, there would be up to 12 valets that would be responsible for moving cars, you know, through the different levels of the garage and getting vehicles, you know, parked or delivered, you know, to drivers as they wait for them. And so for that reason, you know, we felt that the request was minor in nature.
Thank you very much. Do we have other questions? I want to see if we have public comment too. So let's stick to questions.
So Doug, can you just clarify this valet system that's tandem? How does that compare to our beloved Robo Garage behind City Hall? That I understand is a tandem automated valet system. Is it the same type of system?
Yeah, the applicant can confirm that, but my understanding is that what was originally approved was very similar, if not identical, to the system that we have here at City Hall. And so what they are proposing now would be different in that instead of just using tandem parking spaces, the garage would utilize mechanical stackers. So they would be able to, you know, basically park, you know, more vehicles per floor than previously, which is why, you know, the elimination of, you know, 2 basement levels of parking.
Vice Chair, do you have another question, or should we go to?
No, please go to public comment and to anybody else.
Okay, Commissioner Buckner?
Well, I'm having a little bit of uncomfortable us discussing this item since it was going to be on consent and it wasn't noticed properly to the city, to neighbors and city. So I'm going to ask our city attorney whether we should be discussing this at all at this point, since there wasn't really proper notice. When we're talking about the details of the actual changes, and it would seem like if we're going to go forward with this, that we should notice it and continue it.
Well, I think the whole point of the item was to provide transparency and an explanation of what the changes were and how staff came to the determination that they were minor. And that's the purpose of the item. So I think you can have some discussion about what the changes are and why that minor determination was made. If there's disagreement or somebody objects to how staff handled this, then we could talk about what the process is moving forward. But just for purposes of hearing it, that's the purpose of the item, is to give transparency and let the public hear and the commissioners hear what was changed.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Lauren. I really don't have any issue with that. I think it wasn't very clear what the exact changes were in the staff report. There were some details missing that we've now heard tonight. That was my concern.
Great. Any other commissioners with questions? I want to make sure we get public comment if there is any as well. But I want commissioner questions first. Okay, seeing no one's hands, then I will ask David if we have any public comment on this item.
And Chair, no, I'm not showing any public comments that are in the queue to speak on this item. I do want to notate that the applicant, we do have here in the queue in case you have any direct questions for them.
Well, with no public comment and we've all asked questions, this is a receive and file item. And unless there is a process, there is a process that Doug mentioned, but I appreciate staff making this transparent. These used to be items that that would just be done at City Hall and people would wonder what happened. And so this is an additional level of transparency and public awareness. And so with that, I would move to receive and file.
Okay.
There's a second. Is there further discussion?
I just want to make one comment. If you go to Exhibit 9A, Item 9A, Exhibit A, on the third page, it does disclose that the modified parking, 351 parking spaces and 2 less floors. So it is public.
The amendment.
So just so we clear that up. Thank you.
Any additional conversation, or otherwise I will ask David to call the roll. David, please go ahead.
Thank you. Chair Bass?
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner?
Yes.
Commissioner Vinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hooper-Garner?
Yes.
That is 6 ayes, 1 absent, and this is just to receive and file. There is no further action needed.
Thank you very much. Our next item is planning manager's update. So Jennifer?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great.
Okay. I apologize. I don't know what happened there, but apparently it wasn't necessary. So we have some upcoming items. We have one item on March 4th. It looks like it's going to be a condo building or an apartment building on Formosa. And then a handful of items on March 18th scheduled. We have coming up 1282 Fairfax, the Methodist Church. A change of use for 8383 Santa Monica Boulevard, which is the old Aaron's Brothers site, to a health club. 9165 Sunset Boulevard for the billboard that's proposed there, and a zone text amendment for driveway width standards. So that's what's coming up in the next month in March. can't believe it's March already. And as for, I can just cover the subcommittees now as well. And we don't have anything immediately coming up for Design Review Subcommittee, but on March 11th for the Sunset Arts and Advertising Subcommittee, we've got 3 items: 8730 Sunset, 8901 Sunset, and 9157 Sunset. And then we have, and that's all we have scheduled at this point for the subcommittees. If you have any questions on that, otherwise that's all I've got for tonight.
Thank you very much. We now have another opportunity for public comment. David, do we have anyone who would like to speak at this time?
No, I'm not showing anyone that wants to speak at this time.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to commissioner comments and subcommittee management. This is an opportunity for commissioners to weigh in on items, but also let us know if you're going to be absent at a future subcommittee meeting or something like that. So who would like to go first? I'm literally seeing no hands.
I'll be the first to say I don't have anything. So
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Buckner and Jones have nothing. Commissioner Cavallero or Vincent?
I have nothing.
I have nothing on subcommittee management, but in regards to the kind comments that were made earlier, thank you. I'm honored that Commissioner Erickson trusts me enough to be in this position. I am thankful to Councilmember Duran for bringing me to Planning Commission. And I am most grateful to Mayor Horvath, who started this entire process years ago by appointing me to Arts Council. I look forward to continue serving the community and to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Vice Chair Hoopengarner?
No, just as to subcommittee management, I'm planning on a 9-month world tour starting next week. It may only be in my head, but it's the only kind of travel these days. Have a good weekend, rest of the month, everybody.
You too. I have nothing, nothing as well, but I do want to remind everyone that we are adjourning this meeting with sympathy for our colleague, Commissioner Thomas, and we're adjourning in memory of James Hightower and Barbara Besserup. And with that, I will wish you all a good night and see you next time. Stay safe.